I need to log in.
Not at large.
It's on my computer.
It just kind of gets logged
Yes.
on at home,
Yeah,
right?
it's just logged in. I have no idea.
Yeah, I stalled for about 30 seconds. It's like, what was the password? Luckily, I don't know.
Who sits here? Who has the chair? That used to be Jay, right?
Oh, wow.
Carl, right? No.
You might hear it.
Oh, for council.
Extraordinary.
I was never so initiative.
Because no one was
The guy that sat there, he always threw his paper.
Yeah.
Ready to go?
Carl did it too.
Okay.
Jay did it too, I think.
I now call to order the Thursday, July 22nd, 2021 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. Good evening, and it is wonderful to see all of you in person. Thank you so much for being here. We will move on to our first item of business, which is public comment. There are two options listed for public comment. Do we have anyone signed up to give public comment under either option 1 or option 2?
No, sir, we don't.
All right, then we will move on to item 4A, consideration of an action on the minutes of the June 24, 2021 meeting. You've got the minutes which were distributed to you in your packets. Anyone have any changes or revisions to the minutes?
I'll make
or
a motion to approve.
I've got a motion by Commissioner Landine. Is there a second? I've got a second, and if you will vote at this time. And I think, Diane, you had that was your second, correct? Just for the record?
Yes.
Great.
I'll have to vote by hand.
All right.
Couldn't log in.
I guess we'll let you. And I believe that will pass unanimously among the members present. Item 5A, public hearing. At this time, we will receive and hear, well, let's see, what are we going to do? We'll do, I guess, Laura, let's do your presentation, review and discussion on proposed development code amendments to Chapter 2, zoning regulations for connecting unenclosed residential patio covers between primary and accessory structures. We'll hear from you first, and then we'll do the public hearing.
Sounds
And
great.
move on to discussion. Good evening, and it's great to see you in person.
It's great to see everybody. Yes, glad to be here. So we're going to start with the Development Code Amendment. So a little bit of background. This is a city-initiated amendment to allow administrative approval of unenclosed connections, otherwise known as patio covers, between primary and accessory structures. So that's typically a house and a garage, although accessory structure could be a shed or a pool house, some type of secondary structure. Currently, unless the lot is especially deep or has a large easement on the rear of it, adding a patio cover between the house and the garage requires a special exception. So that means that the garage is in that 15-foot setback, and the patio cover is widening the existing breezeway and now connecting the garage to the house. It's a little confusing, but we do have some examples later on in the presentation to go over that a little bit more in depth. But currently, the existing allowed connection between a primary and accessory structure is a 6-foot wide breezeway only. If you have any other widening of that 6-foot wide breezeway, or if the garage is within 10 feet, or if a patio cover is connected to the garage and within 10 feet of the house, all of that requires a special exception unless it's 15 feet from the rear property line. So that's kind of difficult for a lot of the typically laid out lots here in Sugar Land, because most of them have an 8-foot easement rather than a 15-foot setback. So this is why we are moving forward with this amendment to allow those patio covers. This does provide better customer service. It provides time and cost savings to our applicants. And the special exception process right now is only allowed for annexed homes. So this amendment to the code would allow homes that were built inside the city to also add a patio cover between the home and the garage. Currently, that is not an option for them at all. Only the breezeway is allowed. And again, this would apply only to unenclosed additions, such as a patio cover. This would not include enclosed rooms, sunrooms, or anything like that. It would have to be just an unenclosed cover. So we have some recent trends here for you. You can see in the chart there, from 2006 to 2015, there were 101 total special exception cases, and 20 of them, or about 20%, were involving this patio, cover, garage, now connected relationship. From 2015 to the end of fiscal year 2020, which would have been September of 2020, there were about 83 total cases, so a significant increase, and 48 of them, or 57%, were the patio cover relationship. And then just in fiscal year 2021, there were 37 cases as of June, 24 of which involved that patio cover garage connection. So that is a jump to almost 65%. So we have seen a significant increase in the amount of patio covers being built between the house and the garage. Typically, in these cases, there are very few property owners that express any concern. Primarily, we get inquiries about maybe some confusion, not sure exactly what this means, but there have been, I believe, only 3 registered oppositions to a special exception since 2006. Additionally, every special exception for a patio cover addition such as this between the house and the garage has been approved. There has not been one denied since this process began in 2006. So here is the summary of changes. This image is what the finalized version of the code would look like. So you have a redlined version in your packet that includes what we took out as well as what we put in. This is the final draft, so what is only going to be in the future if this amendment passes. So the separation minimum would now be 5 feet instead of 10. That does better align with the international building codes that our residential plans examiners look at. And it would also allow for smaller lots to be able to place that garage a little bit closer to the home and still be considered detached. There's also now no maximum breezeway width, so that does allow for the unenclosed patio cover to widen the breezeway, so there's no 6-foot limitation. There is, however, a new maximum height. So that would, the maximum height is in alignment with the accessory structure height rather than the primary structure height, in order to make sure that any of those connecting structures remain, to keep the bulk away from the property line. So if it's going to be any closer, or if it's going to be 2-story, it would still require the special exception. So here are 2 examples of plot plans that, under the new codes, would be allowed to be approved administratively. So highlighted in red, you can see the proposed patio cover here on this plot plan. And because the patio cover is widening that breezeway, which is currently right here, only 6 feet, this is now quite a bit wider, and so it required a special exception. This was actually approved last night. So this in the future would be able to be approved administratively because the patio cover is unenclosed and is only connecting the house and the garage. The patio cover itself is not in the setback. Again, on the right, you can see in red the proposed patio cover. There is currently a breezeway here, and that is widening and replacing that breezeway, so it is wider than 6 feet and connecting the garage. However, the garage is only 8 feet, it's not 15. So this would be able to be approved administratively under the new codes, whereas 2 months ago it did require a special exception. So these 2 cases are examples of what would still require a zoning board approval. Here on the left, the new patio cover is coming directly off of the house itself, and so the patio cover itself is a primary structure portion, and it's also projecting into that 15-foot setback. This is marked at only 10 feet. So because the patio cover is in the 15-foot setback, it would still require zoning board approval. The same for the right. There is this connection. The black part doesn't show the actual connection to the house, but there was an 11-foot 6-inch connection to the rear of the house here, as well as the patio cover extension itself to the garage. Because the extension here is itself in that 15-foot setback, it would need zoning board approval, as well as because of the, because of the connection. I'm sorry. No, it's just because it's in the 15-foot setback itself. If the patio cover itself were to end maybe here or be shorter and not itself in that 15-foot setback, it would have been administrative approval. But they wanted to go all the way back to the 8 feet. Public hearing requirements were met for the public hearing this evening. We did publish notification online as well as in the paper, and we also set up a specific website for this development code update so that the people, if they had any questions or concerns, they could go to that website for a bit more information. They also got those same examples that you just saw. They were explained on the website as well. However, we did not receive any inquiries, and we are not aware of any opposition at this time. So your initial points for consideration this evening, the amendment does align with our comprehensive plan and land use plan by allowing property owners to reinvest in their homes and add value and shaded space to the backyard. This would also allow them to do that faster with administrative approval rather than having to wait for the once-a-month ZBA meetings, as well as any costs associated with that. Again, this applies only to unenclosed structure between the home and the accessory structure. This would not allow for enclosed rooms, a sunroom, or any kind of enclosure, or to any additions that are in the setback themselves. Again, this allows for enhanced customer service, and it would not affect any other accessory structure regulations. This is only allowing for that letter F for the connection between primary and accessory structures. And homeowners would still have the option of a special exception for larger or enclosed spaces in those annexed areas. Staff is happy to answer any questions after the public hearing closes.
Okay, thanks very much, Laura. At this time, I'll open the public hearing. We will receive and hear any persons desiring to be heard on proposed development code amendments to Chapter 2, zoning regulations for connecting unenclosed residential patio covers between primary and accessory structures. Do we have anyone who wishes to address the commission in public hearing? All right, then I will close the public hearing and we will move on to review and discussion. And we'll do that live with the new seating arrangement, which is exciting. And so, Diane, let's start with you. Comments or questions?
Well, after serving on the Zoning Board of Adjustments in part of 2020 and 2021 and participating in the approval process, I'd have to say that this is a great recommendation. I think that for residents that are applying to go from maybe 3 months to get something approved to 3 weeks, they're going to be really happy about that and the opportunity to save some money too on these types of unenclosed structures. So I think it's a good idea. I don't have any questions
And
specifically.
ZBA will still have plenty of work?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All right, very good. Chuck?
Yeah, good afternoon. A couple quick questions. Number one, I would like to echo the commissioner's comments as well. I think this is a good thing. Also being on ZBA, I think this will free up and help the residents of Sugar Land a lot. This applies only to locations that have a detached garage, right? This isn't to a house that's got an attached garage, because that's a completely
Correct.
different structure, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I may be misremembering here, but I thought at times on some ZBA items, when things were brought to us, we would sometimes add flavor, if you will, to some of our recommendations that required residents to maybe match shingles or something along those lines to keep the house, more uniform to what was perhaps in the neighborhood. If we do this through city code, how is that addressed? Or is that kind of left more open to interpretation now?
So the building materials would not be able to be regulated by the city, but I will say from experience, most of the HOAs do have material requirements, and in the majority of cases, everything is built to match typically whenever it's even first brought in. But it is something that we would lose, is the ability to regulate that patio cover itself, the materials on it, through the ZBA, because it will not be going to ZBA. And unfortunately, the city is not able to regulate building materials at this time.
Mr. Chairman, one thing that I wanted to add, I think it's a good point, and like Laura said, we wouldn't be able to, from a building finish standpoint, the materials, as long as they meet the international building codes. One of the reasons that the ZBA and our staff recommendations normally recommend adopting what the applicant brings, such as their plot plan and elevations, it really actually has more to do with structures that are building closer in the setback. In these cases, I'm not saying that it hasn't been useful in some way, but the garage itself remains, and it's not moving closer. In fact, that's one of the confusion sometime that neighbors call and they say, is that garage moving closer? Well, no, it's kind of converting it essentially. So if you had a case that still was going to the board where something was moving closer, where you were able to look at those materials, I think that would rise to a little bit different level versus something that's kind of in between two structures. So I don't think we'd lose very much there. Generally, the board has been pretty much, they have not asked applicants to alter what they've proposed. And 9 times out of 10, we have had some type of POA or HOA element, as Laura has mentioned too. So
Is that in a pre-approval process? I just did something at my home, and I was required to get HOA approval, a letter in my packet to get that done at my home. Would this be a similar type situation?
Yes.
exactly. And we do ask, we can't hold something normally to HOA approval, but we ask, have people made contact with their HOA, and that's part of their building permit application. And every once in a while, somebody's like, well, I don't have an HOA, and we say, well, I think you do, but that's kind of where that starts happening. A lot of times they've started with them a month or two before they've even come talk to the city. So,
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. And let's go down here to Tim.
Yes, again, a great idea. Thanks for thinking of the residents like that. Was the 5 foot to 10 foot, was that to help out with the lots, with the shorter lots? And
Yes,
then
so,
that doesn't have anything to do with the fire break or anything like that? It's still in?
Correct. So that's why we chose 5 feet instead of, we were also looking at maybe 3 feet, but we chose 5 feet because that would not affect any type of firewall or safety issues. If you get closer than that, you have to start looking at some of the building materials for fire rating. So the reason we chose to bring that down from 10 to 5 is because in a lot of homes, they're actually technically legal non-conforming because the garage is not that full 10 feet away from the house. Or there's a patio cover on the garage and it's not affecting the breezeway, but because it is maybe angled oddly, it comes to within 10 feet of the house. And so now that triggers the garage connection to the house, even though there's actually nothing realistically connecting them, it's just a proximity. And so we're trying to help eliminate those proximity special exceptions as well as the patio cover special exceptions.
And so does unenclosed, does that mean open on at least 3 sides? Or what's the definition of unenclosed?
So staff has, we've put together a document that is just how we plan to address this unenclosed. It's not officially a definition yet in the code, but it would be at least 50% of the exterior walls are open. There is not a wall there. So it would have to be less than 50% without.
So if you have a bend in the house, it can attach to the back of the house and maybe like my master bedroom extends
Yes,
out from the, you can attach to that, but then a third wall
would have to be open.
would have to be open.
So at that point, we would take the perimeter measurements and calculate what percentage of the perimeter has a wall and what percent of it is open.
Okay. And you answered my HOA question, so thank you. No further question.
All right, thanks. AP?
No, just to echo Commissioner Anglett's comments, I think it's a good idea. The numbers show that it's an area that's in more demand, so I think it's great that we're giving homeowners more flexibility. So I think it's a terrific idea. No real questions for me. Thanks.
Thanks. Andy?
Just tell me a little bit what administrative approval means.
So administrative approval means that it would not have to go before the zoning board of adjustment. The property owner would still have to get a building permit and be reviewed by both engineering, planning, and our residential plans examiner for building safety, as well as drainage issues. They also look at impervious cover, those type of calculations. All of that's normally done even for ZBA cases. Administrative approval simply means that it would be able to be done by the staff at the city instead of requiring an appointed board to also review the plans.
And then I think I heard 3 weeks. Is that the expected turnaround time?
It depends on the plan. So if everything is there and it meets all of our standards, it can be as little as potentially 8 days. However, typically the average that we'll see with a quick turnaround to address comments is 3 to 4 weeks for a simple patio cover. However, if it is a special exception, we're typically looking at something more like 2 to 3 months, depending on the exact timing of when the permit first came in, when they can get the application for the special exception in, and then go to the meeting itself. Because because the meeting is only once a month due to public hearing requirements. So it is a significant amount of time savings there.
And then I guess, last question, or A and B. Do temporary structures like sails or other items fall into this category?
No, this would only be for permanent structures.
And then does it have to be fully enclosed on the top, or do pergola-style roofs require the same permitting?
So pergolas and arbors are actually a completely separate structure, and they're considered allowed yard obstructions, so they're allowed to go in that 15-foot setback without any kind of special review by the zoning board. So this only applies to solid roof structures. Pergolas were already allowed
All right.
before.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Taylor?
You mentioned solid roof structures. If I don't have a detached garage, but I want to come out from the back of my house, that's dealt with separately in the code?
So I'm going to take us back to this example here, because this is a patio cover coming off the rear of the house. If this here, instead of a patio cover that's solid, were a pergola instead, it would have been allowed and would not have had to do a special exception.
Okay.
However, because it's a solid roof, it's considered a patio cover and a more permanent structure, and it has to go to the board for approval.
Gotcha. And if you were to, on this, we'll use this example, but not in the setback, and I'm thinking about the height. If it were to match like the pitch of the roof, let's say, and it's it's going to exceed 20 feet, is that dealt with somewhere else in the code, or is it dealt with?
So because this is part of the primary structure, it is allowed up to 35 feet. However, it would have to be at the 15-foot rear yard setback. If it wants to encroach into that setback and be taller than the allowed 20-foot accessory structure, it would have to go before the board for a special exception. And that also depends on what HOA restrictions there are on patio cover height as well. Because essentially a special exception removes city zoning and lets the lot follow their HOA and recorded restrictions instead of zoning. That's what's allowed. So that structure that you're describing would have to have been allowed by the HOA before the home was part of the city. So that's why special exceptions only apply to annexed properties, because they were built outside of the city with different regulations and then annexed, and new regulations were formed. The special exception removes the new city regulations and lets them follow pre-annexation regulations. So if that structure would have been allowed before it was part of the city, then you would still have the option of a special exception. However, if the HOA did not allow it before, it obviously would not be allowed now, or if the city does, or if there is no regulation addressing it, there's no rule for it anywhere in the HOA, then there is no regulation that we would be able to follow in place of the city regulation. So there has to be some sort of pre-existing rule from before the home was part of the city in order to have that allowed, if that makes sense.
I think a related follow-up. And I'll use a hypothetical to try to ask the question. So if the pitch of my roof was 35 feet, could I build off of there or not?
Inside the 15-foot setback, yes, that would be allowed as proposed. However, if you encroach into that 15-foot setback, no, you
Then
would
it triggers
require,
all of the-
it would trigger the special
I got it.
exception.
Okay, all right. And then this is maybe more curiosity, but if I went in my backyard this weekend and I had a detached garage and I went and built this, what type of enforcement, with no permit or whatever, can you just comment a little bit about the enforcement that takes place on these things?
Yes. So we have had some people in the city of Sugar Land who have built a structure without permits and then have been caught either by code enforcement or a building inspector. Sometimes they're turned in by their neighbor to the HOA, and the HOA then informs the city and says, you need to go do this and take care of it. The little slap on the wrist you get is you pay double building permit fees. So if you don't get your permit before the structure is built, if you get it after, you do have to pay double fees, as well as if it doesn't meet our code, you do have to rip it out so that it meets our code. So
What happens if I refuse to rip it out?
you get taken to municipal court.
Go see the judge. Okay, yeah, again, that was just more of a curiosity. What's a building permit cost? Just out of
It
curiosity.
depends, it's based on square footage.
Oh, okay, okay, interesting. Thanks.
I think you'll find neighbors are probably the most powerful enforcement mechanism that we have. You can rake leaves and you'll get, and the city will get calls, I can almost assure you. Yeah, but you hate to see that.
Same thing applies if you buy a house, are you selling a house and you don't disclose? Your neighbors will, oh, they had a flood or
They'll
whatever.
disclose. Go ahead, Dan, any comments?
Actually, no. So many have served on ZBA and have seen this come and go, and the comprehensiveness of your knowledge on it, and you're having addressed the answers so well. I've got nothing left. Thank you, Laura. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, a couple from me, if that's okay. So is the term patio cover defined anywhere in the development code?
It is not.
Do you think that would be, have you all considered whether or not it would be important to take a stab at a definition?
We would, yes, we could entertain that. Mhm.
Okay. And that kind of relates to I think what Tim's point was earlier, that, with he asked whether or not there was a definition of unenclosed, but perhaps you could think about that and knock that out in the definition of patio cover. And then if you did that, I think that would become a term of art. You would probably capitalize it in here and show that in the red line. But other than that, I agree with the other comments that are made. As long as there's no sense that we're giving up the ability to regulate anything and making the change, which it sounds like to me technically we are. However, it doesn't come up that much, and most of the time there are some other checks and balances in place, and not universal coverage, but it sounds like that staff is comfortable that most of the situations would get addressed somewhere.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Well, as long as, everyone recognizes that and is comfortable with it, I think this is fine, subject to the other comments, and I have no other questions. Anything else?
No motion to that, right?
No, we're just review and discussion. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Appreciate it. And we will move on to item 5A. We'll move on to item 6, because I can actually read Roman numerals. Reports. A, Planning and Zoning Commission liaison report from the July 6, 2021 City Council meeting. Who had that? Thank you for going.
That was very interesting. So there were two items that were on the agenda that had previously been approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The first of which is the Hill Area Project. So Abby Martinez provided the same presentation that she had shared with us on June the 8th, and the City Council had also held a workshop on this topic on June 22nd. So they were very familiar with it. There was an individual that lives in the Hill that showed up that had a concern, but it was really unrelated to what the recommendation was and the ordinance. It had to do with Lake Cleveland and some vegetation there, so that's going to be addressed separately by staff. So actually, the item was approved unanimously by the City Council. Then there was a second item, and it was for first consideration, and it was the changing the zoning from a standard single-family residence R1 to the R1Z for Misty Lake, Grant Lake patio homes, and also Grants Lake, and Chimney Stone, sections 1, 2, and 3. And if you're familiar with them, I won't go through all the detail. But anyway, it was pretty interesting. It was a first reading, as I said, and so Abby went again. She provided the similar presentation that we had had on May the 27th in the P&Z meeting. There was one resident from Misty Lake, and she expressed a concern that she actually stated two objections. And one was the inapplicability of zoning, because what she was saying is that she knows that it's not the case that every home in the subdivision is built on the zero lot line. So she was concerned of how that would impact homes in the future. And then she said she didn't get timely notice. So there was a lot of discussion. Actually, Doug explained that the rezoning from R1 to RZ would actually decrease the gap and get closer to what is platted and built. So this was really a better option for all the residents that were there. because he said as of today, the city really could not approve changes in buildings without going through a variance process. So the only way to determine the exact placements of homes would be to go out there and do a survey of each individual residence, or see which of the residents already had a survey that they could share with the city staff. So, and if I'm misspeaking or you want to add anything, please do, Doug. Anyway, so there's 154 lots in the Misty Lake section. So the mayor asked if it was possible to create a special district to allow homes to be built as before in case there was a fire, so that people wouldn't be at a loss if their home burned. So there was some discussion around that, and the mayor actually wasn't comfortable with rezoning if some houses would be negatively impacted, so he wanted more assurance that that would be the case. And then Ms. Watley asked if there were any special conditions that could be added to R1Z. The city manager mentioned that there could be a PD, if there was a PD, but after further discussion, the mayor proposed to table that section for Misty Lake and proceed with a vote on the other two sections in Grants Lake and in Chimney Stone. So that's exactly what happened, and so that was approved for those two sections to go to the second reading. And then staff, of course, is going to continue to work with the residences to make sure that they can address any issues and concerns and resolve them in Misty Lake. So I think that was a good option and a result of the discussion. And the other, when she talked about, the resident talked about not getting timely notification, actually when the first postcard went out for the first meeting, it had both dates on there. So even if she didn't get the second postcard till later, she would have gotten the first postcard. So I think that was addressed through the discussion.
Fantastic, thanks. And did you also have the July 20 meeting?
Yes, I did.
Okay, go ahead.
You didn't want to hear the discussion of the budget workshop?
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
I wasn't gonna
I
go
thought
in-
you were
that was
stopping.
like an hour
No,
and a
please,
half,
by all
so-
means. By all means.
No, that's okay. We'll move to the July 20th meeting. We'll have lots more time to talk about the budget and other meetings. Okay, so, there were several people, again, that showed up at the July 20th City Council meeting to talk about the Hill project. So I think as it gets closer to approval, more people are realizing we better come out and speak about it. So actually, it was really interesting. The first, after the public hearing opened, Terry Nyrider, who was the chair of the committee and lives as a resident in the Hill, she had submitted a letter which was read into record. And I was hoping to get a copy of that to share with y'all, but you'll have to look yourself. It's not posted out there on the website yet. But it was very positive and supportive of the recommendation, of course, and also the work that staff had done in working with everyone. And there were several other ladies that had shown up from the Hill project that were also very supportive. They didn't get up and have specific comments, but they were there and their names were mentioned and they were in the record. So that was good. There were a few other people that spoke, though. There was a gentleman who had just moved into the neighborhood 6 weeks ago, and he was concerned that the rules regarding the width of the home are meant for roof lines that are perpendicular to the street. And the roof line of his home and those of two of his neighbors, the roof lines are parallel to the street. And so he asked to be carved out of the regulations. And then there was another gentleman who lives on Lakeview that agreed with the regulations for the north side of the Hill area, but not the south side. He asked if the south side could be excluded from the regulations. Then another couple who also lives on Lakeview, they had heard rumors about several things and they wanted some clarification because they'd heard that they didn't want an HOA to begin with, right? And we had heard that through our presentation. But they didn't want someone telling them what color their door could be. And if they cut down a tree, did they have to put in another tree? And so they just had a lot of questions. Could they worry about what they had to plant in their front yard? So I guess when Abby got up there and talked about and went through the same presentation, all those questions were really answered. It didn't appear that they had any additional concerns. So overall, it was a very lively discussion. But as a result of that, when the consent agenda came up, of which the Hill project was on that, it was pulled from the consent agenda so that the council could have further discussion and talk with staff. So in that, after talking through everything, in Abby's presentation and all the Q&A, staff recommended that council approve the ordinances for the Hill area, and that staff would develop a timeline to continue to work with all the residents on the north side of Lakeview so that they could resolve their concerns. And then the mayor made a motion to approve item 3A in the Hill project, and it was approved 6-1 with Councilman Ferguson opposing. So, yeah, it was a very interesting discussion, and I'm sure that we'll hear more on how that works out with the Lakeview residents. And the second item that was on there that we had heard about in our meeting was the change in zoning from R1 to R1Z for the Enclave and Grants Lake and Chimney Stone sections. And that was approved 7-1 unanimously. And reminder that Misty Lakes was taken out because they're going to continue to work on that, so that was not part of what was approved. Let's see, there were a couple of other interesting items that was discussed on Tuesday. One was I thought this was great, there's a capital donation between the City of Sugar Land and the Sugar Land Citizens Police Academy Alumni Association. They actually raised over $34,000, and they are donating that money to the Sugar Land Police Department for drones and accessories and licensed software, so that the police department, when they're trying to get to areas that are hard to access or in someone's backyard, they can have the drones go there, and it'll be much safer because they'll get a quick look of what's going on before they actually have to show up and go into an unsafe situation. So that'll be a great safety thing. So that was nice. And then there was also, Sugar Land, you might know this already, Sugar Land has the second lowest tax rate in Texas compared to similar sized cities in Texas. So that was nice to know. And then also 98% of survey respondents rated Sugar Land as a good place to live compared to 71% in the national average. So I thought that was an item of interest y'all might want to know about. And other than that, Jennifer May provided a 30-minute overview of the fiscal year of 2022 annual budget and the 2022 to 2026 capital improvement plan. There'll be a budget workshop in August that the city will have, and then final approval will be expected by September 21st. So there were 2 action-packed meetings that I got to learn and report back on. So do y'all have any questions?
Well, thanks very much for your reports. I'm glad you got some interesting meetings to go to, and I agree, the police technology appropriations are always really interesting.
Yeah.
Did they discuss when they could fly this drone over your backyard? You know, I mean,
No,
it
there
seems
was
like that
there
would
was
be
no
a little bit
discussion.
unlawful search and seizure. I'm curious to see what they talk about there, how that
Well, I'm waiting
works.
to get shut down on
Yeah.
that discussion.
It was strictly when they were trying to solve a crime.
Strictly in a hot situation, responding to exigent circumstances, I am sure. Okay, well, thanks very much for those reports. Let's move on to item 6B, city staff report. Doug?
Your next meeting is going to be August 10th. Based on what we know this evening, we might have a preliminary plat for, if you'll remember, about a year ago, the P&Z recommended townhome project on Lake Point, and that project got approved zoning by council. They're now going with their platting for the project, so that the preliminary plat is likely to be next. What we'll also do, just real briefly mention for our new commissioner, newest commissioner, is we'll probably do a little bit of a contact with you on some platting information and our platting guide that we put together based on some of the state law things, just to kind of refresh. So we'll send that out to you and talk to you about that. The other item we'll probably, that we know of, likely be able to turn around the item from this evening based on some definitions, and we'll work with legal and see. So we may be able to go ahead and bring that for consideration and action. So we'll see on that how that's going.
Okay. Chuck, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. I got an email today. There's August 3rd.
I was going to mention that too, yeah.
Oh, that came
Yes.
Yeah, Lisa, you're going to talk about that, so it's, as I understand.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
joint
do it.
meeting
No.
of
So that's your special meeting, the joint meeting that we'll be holding with City Council on the Mobility Master Plan. So you will be getting more information about that. It's to review the draft goals that have been created for the Mobility Master Plan, and wanted to share them with both you and City Council. And so we'll do that in a joint session on August 3rd.
Do you already have a start time for that meeting?
It'll probably be sometime after 6 PM. The council will start their regular meeting here in the chamber, and then we'll all reconvene in the Kane Room for the workshop.
So we should come here first and sit in on the council, or should we go
Y'all
straight
are
to
probably
the other
welcome
room?
to just hang out in the,
Okay.
you're welcome to come into the chamber, but
course.
everybody will be joining you in the Kane Room for the meeting. So,
Is this
Yeah.
going to be a long one, or is this,
I wouldn't anticipate it being super long.
Yeah.
No, I mean, an hour tops. It really depends on the discussion. So, yep,
You won't confirm or deny.
I wouldn't either.
leave it flexible, so.
Last quick thing, when Laura last presented to you, she was a Planner 1. Since that time, she's been promoted to Planner 2, and I just wanted to recognize that. So,
Congratulations. Congratulations, Laura, and thank you very much, Doug, and thank you, everyone, for your robust contributions to our discussions tonight. It was good to see everyone in person. Is there a motion to adjourn?
motion?
I hear a motion to adjourn. Is there a
Second.
second? We have a motion and a second. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. We are adjourned.
You gotta get a little more aggressive with that.